We're back in Westeros, and at least with this first episode of House of the Dragon, it feels maybe too familiar. Though it is set 200 or so years prior to Game of Thrones, this time with more dragons and silvery blonde Targaryens in power. The franchise's cynical fascination with patriarchal arrogance remains intact. But perhaps there is hope with Rhaenyra. Could she be a course correction to how the original series concluded Daenerys' arc? With George R. Martin more involved this time around, it certainly feels like it. What has piqued my interest most thus far is the friendship between Rhaenyra and Alicent Hightower. I would very much like to live within this princess fairy tale a little while longer before war breaks out. I'm not alone in sensing some infatuation brewing between them.
Like she just wants to like have her freedom, ride her dragon, and flirt with Alicent Hightower in the Godswood.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Which, yeah, you mentioned those vibes. I do get more than friends vibes from Rhaenyra and Alicent, especially like this scene is so like I don't know. I saw echoes of like the types of female friendships that I had when I was a teenager, but also like with this tinge of like, oh, is this feeling that I have for you more than friendship? How do you define that?
Mm-hmm.
Girlhood is it's a tricky subject. I spoke with the actors Millie Alcott and Emily Carey specifically about this. It came up in my roundtable interview, and Millie was sort of like, it might seem like we're in love because I just love Emily a lot, and like
Mm.
that chemistry was sort of like there. And then Emily, who is a queer woman, said like, "Oh, I absolutely saw that subtext in that, and we were very aware of the fact that like this is like a weird gray area of like bonding that they've experienced as 14-year-olds."
Is Rhaenyra out of breath because of her dragon ride?
That's almost large enough to settle too.
I believe I'm quite content as a spectator. Thank you.
Or did Alicent just take her breath away?
You aren't worried about your position?
I like this position, it's quite comfortable. Where are you going?
Home.
As much as I would like these choices from the actors to rub off onto future romance plots, I suspect the story to pivot toward a more heteronormative direction, if only to adhere to the traditional power grab methods of marrying into it or retaining power with an heir. Here's to hoping the queer subtext isn't just bait, as more apparent gayness would serve the themes of the show well. House of the Dragon seems to be doubling down on the folly of traditional gender roles. The viewer is certainly meant to empathize with Alicent when her father sends her to comfort the grieving king. As for Rhaenyra,
You will lie in this bed soon enough, Renera. This discomfort is how we serve the realm.
I'd rather serve as a knight and ride to battle and glory.
it's a sentiment reminiscent of the gender non-conforming Arya from the original series. We're all rooting for Rhaenyra to subvert the role of a princess and not end up like her mother. It's depressing to see Queen Aemma apologize to Viserys for failing to provide him with a male heir after several miscarriages, and unbearable to watch her die during a forced medieval cesarean. The gruesome scene is intercut with the violence of the tournament, as if to compare the horrors both men and women face in Westeros. Though the emphasis is on the lack of agency given to women.
But It sometimes becomes necessary for the father to make an impossible choice.
Well, speak it.
To sacrifice one or to lose them both.
It's made very clear to him that Emma is going to die either way. The only choice that you really have in the matter is whether you try to save the child.
This reading from the showrunner feels like a cop-out to save Viserys' character. The Maester's words read to me like Emma had a chance to survive if the baby was lost. It's an impossible choice only the mother should make. Viserys' callous decision to choose his potential heir over his wife represented the peak of patriarchal horror the episode was building up to. However you interpret his choices may not matter as much as the larger evil of the scene. No one thought to consult Emma. Maybe she would have sacrificed herself. Instead, the men in the room treated her as a vessel. Following the overturning of Roe v. Wade over the summer, I hope the similarities between Westeros and the real world won't be lost on US viewers. Speaking of women's liberation, I do wish Sonoya Mizuno as Nasaria was given a better introduction. Introducing the only woman of color in the doggy-style position isn't ideal. Apparently she plays a former sex slave, which might be interesting if the show actually deals with trafficking, prostitution, and/or sex work in a serious way, and not just as eye candy. Had the scene at least focused more on her perspective, then I would have been less bored. Instead, it's just another run-of-the-mill sex scene with yet another woman serving as a support character for the bigger male role. I don't remember much from that Netflix show Maniac, but I do remember Sonoya as Dr. Azumi Fujita. Just saying, she deserved a better entrance. I would have settled for an entrance a step down from Damien's. This scoundrel. Surely what his gold cloaks are up to in this episode has no connection to the real world.
Warning to our audience, our next story contains graphic footage and descriptions of police violence. In Arkansas, 2 Crawford County Sheriff's deputies and a Mulberry City police officer have been suspended after they were caught on camera brutally beating a man as they pressed him face first into the pavement. Video posted to social media shows one officer holding the man down as 2 others repeatedly kick and punch him. At one point, one of the officers is seen slamming the man's face into the pavement. 27-year-old Randall Worcester was taken to a hospital with head injuries after his violent arrest where he refused treatment. The Arkansas State Police said Sunday it has launched an investigation.
I wonder how the show will address race moving forward. Will it take inspiration from medieval history, the same way it has for its dire depiction of gender? Or will it take the colorblind approach? So far, I'm noticing only a marginal improvement from Game of Thrones when it comes to representation. But seeing that Corlys Velaryon is largely ignored at the council table indicates that the writers may have something to say about his place as the only black man in the room. And though I'm not so sure Massaria needed an exotic accent, it at least strays away from any icky stereotype.
The King Solaire once again.
After the tragedy of Queen Emma and her child's death, the episode ends with Viserys choosing Rhaenyra as his successor. From what I understand, he then tells Rhaenyra a family secret unknown even to book readers, that the Targaryens have been holding on to a prophecy foretelling the coming of an apocalyptic winter. This coming of winter was of course fumbled in the final episodes of Game of Thrones, but maybe this teases a superior conclusion in the yet-to-be-finished books. The monologue attempts to tie the franchise together. It's mostly successful, and won't bother me much if that's the last we hear of it on House of the Dragon. I'm more interested to see how Rhaenyra's reign plays out, and how well they pull off the upcoming time jump.